Hello everyone, it's GigaBeef here, and today we're looking at the next set of changes from BSG, primarily to armor, ammo and crafting, and these are really big as well, but perhaps more balanced than the other day. Firstly, we have some new crafts for ammo. At Workbench 2, we have 80 M80 rounds for 7.62x51 NATO, 150 9x21 BT for the Shrimp pistol and the SR2M SMG, and 100 SS190 rounds for the P90 and the 5.7 pistol. Those last two are the top rounds in their respective caliber with 39 and 37 penetration respectively. Then at Workbench level 3, we now have a new craft for 120 300 blackout APs as well. These are pretty welcome changes. On the original adjustments, it did feel strange that M80 was moved to Peacekeeper 4 for purchase but didn't get a craft, whereas M61 does, so I'm glad that that was added. At nearly 10 hours of base time and a crafting cost of roughly 200,000 rubles for 80 bullets, this comes to about 2.5k each, which is really not cheap at all. But often the issue in Tarkov these days is access to stuff rather than the money specifically, so if you're careful with your M80 through mag stacking and using semi-auto weapons, then this could be an option. There are a bunch of requirements to get to Workbench 2, but the main one is Mechanic 2, so in theory it is possible to actually get access to this craft at level 20. 9x21 BT comes to about 1,500 per round, and SS190 to about 3,100. These are much more of a problem unless you're using the pistols, as the weapons that they go into are designed to be used on full auto. We're going to have to start measuring RPM in rubles per minute with these ones. The thing is though, we saw 9x21 BT removed already from the traders, but it seems that SS190 has been stealth removed from Peacekeeper as well, and SB193, which is the second best round for the P90, has been moved up to Peacekeeper 4. So unless there is some quest locked stuff that we have yet to see, if you want to be using the P90 with the top ammo, it looks like the craft is really going to be the only way to get it. 300 blackout AP looks to be about 1,300 rubles, which doesn't seem too bad in all honesty, given this stuff performs nearly as well as 7.62 BP. But I guess the main problem here is that once you get access to it at Workbench 3, you also have access to craft BP itself at Workbench 3 for much the same price. This was another one that seems to have been stealth removed from Peacekeeper 4 as well, so again is now apparently the only way to access this ammo and really unlock the potential of the MCX. Speaking of BP, there have been some changes to the existing crafts. BP is now more expensive with 1 extra green powder and 1 extra blue, coming to 3 of each, which is about 1,400 rubles now, but the time of crafting it was reduced a little bit down to 15 hours. The 9x19 AP 6.3 craft has been buffed slightly, only using 150 PST rounds now instead of 400, which is about 390 rubles per bullet. Its crafting time was nearly doubled though to 16 hours. Although 390 rubles seems cheap nowadays, it's hard to want to do this craft as you still have to tie up your hideout making these and you only get 150, along with AP 6.3 simply not being very good overall due to its issues with fighting against players wearing class 4 armor. The Flechette craft, which uses metal fuel tanks, was nerfed as well, needing 4 more blues for a total of 5, and this was given a longer time of 5 hours as well. This is still pretty short in this new world, but the craft also gives less of them with only 60 is the output. This makes them roughly 800 rubles each to make, assuming zero cost for the empty metal tanks, and although these are sellable on the flea, with the market fees I actually don't think it's possible to make a profit until you have Intel Center 3 to reduce the taxes. 1,400 rubles is the optimal price to sell them, with 844 in fees per cartridge and 556 rubles of profit, which doesn't cover the costs of production. As a side note, Flechette itself at Jaeger has been increased in price to 334 rubles as well. Then a couple of crafts have had time changes. PS12B for the Ash 12 is down to 13 hours, and 45 AP for the Vector and the UMP is up to 15 hours, which for reference are about 2,300 and 1,200 each respectively. Pretty much all the good ammo crafts are now 10 to 15 hours across the board. Given the limited quantities that you get for this time invested, it really is going to be down to the semi-auto weapons that can utilize each individual bullet the best that I believe are going to be the best crafts to do out of this new selection. Alright, so moving on to the armor changes, the biggest and most obvious one is the Rat Rig, otherwise known as the catchy name the 6B3TM, moving from 55k to 70k on Ragman 2. This armor has been one of Tarkov's most used in the mid-game and even later sometimes for a very long time due to its amazing price for the performance. What's more, you are now limited to 1 per reset from Ragman, down from I believe 4 previously. You pretty much never used to run out, but now you have to wait 3.5 hours to buy another one in cash. This is probably a bigger deal overall than the price increase and heavily restricts what was once basically unbridled access to class 4 as soon as you hit Ragman 3. There is another way to access this though, using the new barter for 3 chainlets and 1 teapot that comes to about the same price most of the time, so effectively you can still buy 2 per cycle. Another interesting effect is that the price of the 6B3TM is now much closer to that of the MMAC rig. When the MMAC was first introduced, it was very cheap, and sometimes even cheaper than the rat rig due to the barter ingredients. Naturally, a whiskey was added and torpedoed its usage, but it has remained as another good class 4 option at Ragman 2. Given the price difference is now so much smaller, it's less of a reach to pay 85 to 90k for it, as it has higher effective durability, repairs well, and has a great internal layout too, although it does get stolen way more often. Then with the Trooper armor at around 100k or a bit more on the flea market, which is arguably the best class 4, it's now a much closer decision on what to get. This reminds me a little bit of the RFB situation back when M80 was moved to Peacekeeper 3. It wasn't immediately obvious what the next best choice was going to be anymore. If the decision is difficult, I'd argue that the balancing is kind of working out. The other potentially impactful change for a bit later into the wipe is the Gazelle cash purchase at Ragman 3 has been removed. This was always quest locked relatively late on down his progression, but seemingly only the barter trade remains now. We will still be able to buy them, but now it will be more at the whims of the market prices for the ingredients, and I imagine that this will also mean that we'll be seeing more Koruns in the game later on, assuming nothing happens to that one for the time being at least. According to the players who have access to the endgame traders already, the Reese and the Altin helmet barters have also been removed from the traders. There has been some speculation that some of this stuff will eventually end up on Lightkeeper, but who knows at this stage. One final change that is worth mentioning, the Schmidt & Bender 1x8 looks to have been removed from Jaeger. We literally discussed this in the last video about how the sensitivity has been fixed and it might become meta to rival the Voodoo and the Razor, and just like that, it's gone already. It now seems to be mid 60k-ish on the flea market versus the Voodoo and the Razor's mid 80s, but we'll see how it goes as we progress. So in summary, BSG are restricting access to many top tier items both on the ammo and armor side. It's clear that they want us to get these powerful rounds by deliberately making a choice on what we want to use and crafting it ourselves in limited quantities rather than always relying on the traders and stocking up, which I think is an interesting choice. There are lots of complaints about casual players in the community, but some casuals themselves are welcoming the changes. Relatively speaking, not having to deal with max trader players with BP every raid outweighs the accessibility adjustments, and with some of these good ammo crafts now available on Workbench 2, you can potentially compete at level 20 just by doing some lengthy crafts while you're away from the PC and not playing anyway. I think these changes primarily hurt the relatively dedicated but not super hardcore group of the community, happy to grind quests like Punisher and Grenadier to access what they want for the rest of the wipe, but aren't super proficient at farming raiders on labs, for example, for the ammo. Top players will always have an advantage, but this group in the 50 to 80th percentile of players will certainly take a hit in my opinion. Personally, I am glad that BSG are making big bold changes. We will only know how the game feels by giving it a try, and if the endgame state of Tarkov is supposed to look like anything that we've been told it is, then we were always going to be getting some of these inevitable steps towards the end result. And if it sucks and the community really hates it, well, I guess they can always put stuff back. So next up, go and check out my video on 6 important things that you should know about 0.13, including how to bypass flash drives if you have EOD. Otherwise, as usual, a big shout out to all my patrons, hit all the buttons if you enjoyed the video, and as always, have fun in your raids.